All right. I would like to welcome Jim Dahl. He has agreed to give a special presentation on some of the bike and pedestrian improvements that are coming to Tyler and Harrison. So take it away, Jim.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve. So I agreed to a presentation. I'm not so sure how special it is, but well, at least I'll present what the project is. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay, so are you able to see my screen? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Can
perfect.
you see us down the side?
I see, yeah, I can see you still, and yeah, I still see some of the names or whatever. So yeah,
Okay, great.
so I've got my screen split. So hopefully this will work. So
All right.
technology is always interesting. So again, my name is Jim Dahl. Appreciate being here. I am project manager with the Oregon Department of Transportation. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of just present this project that we're working on in Corvallis. And really for this group and this meeting, really focus on what kind of pedestrian and bicycle improvements we're proposing to make at these locations. Um, and so kind of where we're at with this. So just a little bit myself. I will say I do actually live in Corvallis, live in South Corvallis, and I also do actually bicycle to work. So I'm a bicycle user. Of course, that should be inconsequential because as far as ODOT is concerned, we should be making the most appropriate improvements anywhere within the highway, within any kind of setting we have. So, but I that I live in Corvallis, I do ride bicycles. I do have an interest too, and to see that these improvements are the best they possibly can be. So, um, I'll move to here. Okay. So again, this presentation is going to be fairly, hopefully fairly straightforward, fairly simple, but just want to go really identify where the project's located that we're planning on working on, and then summarize what the goals we have for the project, what guidance we used to come up with our design proposals, and then go into the more details about what specific improvements, bicycle and pedestrian in particular, we're planning to make on Harrison Boulevard, and also at a couple intersections on Tyler Avenue, 2nd Street, and Tyler Avenue and 3rd Street. So again, this project is located in near downtown Corvallis. So basically, as you come off the Harrison Bridge over the Willamette River, that's the start of our project. So it runs along Harrison Boulevard from 2nd Street to 4th Street. And then in addition, we are doing a couple intersection improvements on Tyler Avenue at 2nd Street and also at 3rd Street. Um, so for that's the city streets, but for ODOT's concern is Harrison Boulevard and Tyler and 2nd and 3rd Street are actual highways also, right? They're highways on top of city streets. So for us, we see this as US 20, which is 2nd Street, northbound, southbound, OR 34, east and westbound on Van Buren and Harrison, and then also OR 99 West, which is northbound and southbound. So we see as making improvements to the highway, and in this case, make improvements for road users. So that's kind of where we're at for the location of the project. What are our goals for the project? So really, when this project was first identified, the one simple goal was actually just to replace some aging traffic signals along Harrison Boulevard. So Harrison Boulevard and 2nd Street and Harrison Boulevard and 3rd Street have some traffic signals that have aged. And for safety and for maintenance concerns, we are just talked about replacing them. Once the project was identified and funded, additional funding was found and was used for this project to actually then make some additional pedestrian and bicycle improvements within the project limits. And so some of the things that we're gonna, with that extra additional funding, is upgrade non-compliant ADA curb ramps, so that the ramps who walk on there. Now, obviously, some of that work would have already been done under the signal replacements, but we actually are doing additional intersections with additional funding. And really with this goal, since we're going beyond just replacing signal poles, we're trying to design these project areas, these corridors, small corridors that they are, to reduce conflicts between different road users. So again, motorized vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and freight traffic too. So look to improve the safety and comfort for all active transportation users. And also what I didn't identify is that these are three highways here, Oregon 99 West, OR 34, and US 20. All of these we identify as what we call freight routes. And so any changes we make to the configuration of these highways, we actually have to get concurrence from a mobility advisory committee um, to for these to make these changes. And again, one of those people on that board would be freight users, right? So again, there's a lot of freight traffic in this location. If you've been there, you obviously see the trucks in there. And it's not just the trucks are going just straight through the city or whatever. They're actually a lot of times making churning movements, moving from one highway to another. So for instance, a lot of churning from OR 34 westbound, coming off the Harrison Boulevard Bridge and then turning northbound on Oregon 99 West 3rd Street. So again, we have to make sure we can accommodate all freight traffic in these locations. And finally, one of our goals is always, whenever we're working within a local agency, in this case, the city of Corvallis, we want to stay consistent with the transportation system plans that they have in effect. So again, we don't want to do anything that's in conflict or it's going to impact their future goals of their city. So what did we use for guidance for what we designed? And again, here's kind of talks about what we have, what our traffic volume was, our speeds and stuff like that. But really, the design team used our ODOT highway design manual. And in there, they have criteria of whenever you're doing designs within an urban corridor. And so we use that criteria to come up with what we think are the appropriate facilities for bicycles and pedestrians in these locations. Obviously within the constraints of where we're at, right? I mean, if there's a building in the way, you're not going to tear that down. But again, what goals we can within the framework that we have. And under our guidance, we identified this area as a tier 1 facility, which is a separated buffered bike lane is what we're proposing. And again, that's primarily going to be along Harrison Boulevard where we're doing a corridor work. We're actually working multi-blocks. It's hard to do things just at a single intersections for that. But again, also beyond our highway design manual guidance, we also coordinated and discussed with the city of Corvallis about what their needs were for these areas, what they would like to see, and make sure any improvements we made to the projects or to the area were in a conformance with their systems plan and again their ultimate goals for this project. Again, one thing that we talked about that they mentioned a lot was that they are actually proposing, and I'm sure this group is well aware of that, of a neighborhood bikeway facility along Tyler Avenue from 1st Street, I guess all the way through the city is kind of what I've heard. And so obviously any improvements we're making on the highway, we want to make sure if we have the capability, the infrastructure ability to be in compliance with that ultimate goal in there. And I think that's what we've done with this design is hopefully we'll be able to show. So what improvements are we actually looking for this project? So again, in addition to replacing those traffic signals on Harrison Boulevard, what we're proposing, our design team, and again, it's not me, it's everyone else does all the work. I get to give these presentations. So right now, Harrison Boulevard has 3 travel lanes. And then they have a shoulder and bike lane on the north side of the road. Our design team has proposed to maintain those 3 travel lanes. Again, because there are so many freight routes and churning movements, we can't reduce those travel lanes. But having a shoulder on the north side, but instead of having the bike lane right next to that northern travel lane, have a concrete separation, and then having a bike lane behind that concrete separation, have a planter space, and then have a sidewalk behind that. So the sidewalk, the bike lane are separated, but then also all of that is separated from the motorized vehicles. And so to kind of concept this, his is a cutout I had of a plan sheets that we have that we're proposing. And it's kind of a little complicated. There's a bunch of these bubble things. This is actually a striping plan sheet. So all these bubbles show what kind of striping we're going to have. So white, W means white stripe. RA is a right turn angle or turn arrow. So, but really it is the best sheets to show exactly what we're proposing for the bike lane. So here is if you can see my arrow, off the bridge, 2nd Street, there's a bike lane. They would cross the intersection of 2nd Street, and then move into this bike lane. And this bike lane is actually separated. This really dark area is concrete. So it's actually separated from the northernmost westbound travel lane, motorized travel lane. So there's a separation. And then this checkered area is actually a planter buffer for where you'd have trees, put the trees back in, and then we'd have our sidewalk back there. So we're actually providing safety for that. Also, we are proposing to use some green paint, in this case, at any conflicts of driveways. So those are potential conflict points. So put green paint in. Also, from 2nd Street, where there's the bike lane, and then there's a right turn lane on the right side of the bike lane, putting green paint. The city, I see that several places in the city of Corvallis. Also, basically identified as a potential conflict point. And so as you're on Harrison Boulevard moving westbound on a bike, you'd be separated. And then if you keep moving through 3rd Street, you would continue to be separated. And then as you get to 4th Street, you'd be separated. And then once you got past 4th Street, which is really the end of the highway, there would be, here's a concrete little separator that your bike lane would be, and you would transition back to the bike lane being right next to that westbound travel lane, a motorized lane, as we go into the city street. So that's kind of what we're proposing. Again, these areas, we kind of see this is green paint we're identifying, using as potential conflict points. Again, it's kind of hard to see. And then there are some turning movements. One thing also we're proposing, and this may not be what you seem as necessary for improvements for bike safety, but at these individual intersections, we're actually proposing pulling back the curve a little bit, and actually creating a concrete apron. So it's at grade, so trucks would be able to use that, have a little wider, flatter curve to make those turn movements. And so they wouldn't be jumping on the curb, which happens on a regular basis in several of these intersections. So again, that's improving the safety of people that are standing on the sidewalk or curb, behind the curb. Also, it's actually helping the freight community by being able to make those turn movements a little easier without having to worry about jumping up on the curb or hearing some infrastructure on there. So, so some of the improvements we're going to make on there for even truck movement, which in my mind also makes safety improvements for bicycles and pedestrians in there. So that was Harrison Boulevard. If we look at the individual intersections on Tyler Avenue and 2nd Street and Tyler Avenue and 3rd Street, this one's 2nd Street, we propose these solutions, and really these were at the guidance of the city of Corvallis. So the city of Corvallis in their neighborhood bikeway along Tyler Avenue proposed restricting motorized traffic on Tyler Avenue. And so one thing we looked to do was, in this case, this is US 20 2nd Street, north and southbound. Right now there's a travel lane northbound, travel lane southbound with 2 bike lanes on either side and a center turn lane. So our proposal is to actually install a median separator across from perpendicular Tyler Avenue to restrict motorized vehicles from going across Tyler Avenue. And again, this is what the city wanted. And again, this is a change to our highway. So we had to get concurrence from our freight industries individuals. And they actually did support this position, which and actually had no qualms about it. So that was really great to hear. So, but to kind of visualize this, so again, this is a plan view of what we're proposing. So here is Tyler Avenue, and here's 2nd Street, or US 20. So we're proposing some kind of island, concrete separator with cutouts for pedestrian crossing, and then also cutouts for bicycles either way of that. And here is a image of it. This is not anywhere. This is in another city. It's actually an image we actually received from the city of Corvallis, is what they thought is the concept of this would look like. So as you can see, there's a concrete separator. We are proposing, I think, put some kind of signs or bollards or something like that to further provide vertical clearance or whatever to show that you should not be going across this. But again, allows bicycles and pedestrians to cross Tyler Avenue, but not motorized vehicles. So that's kind of what we're proposing on this. And then for the other intersection, Tyler Avenue and 3rd Street, we are proposing, again, not a whole lot of changes. Again, we're kind of limited in what we can do, again, with the existing configuration of the road. But right now there are 2 travel lanes, both northbound, with parking on either side and then a bike lane. And then our proposal actually is to maintain those 2 northbound travel lanes, maintain the bike lane, but actually have curb extensions that come out, much like they have in the downtown Corvallis area that you see, across from the white side and stuff like that, which really would then shortens the crossing distance of pedestrians. Also, it has the pedestrians be out more in front of any parked vehicle, so they're more visible to the traveling public or motorized vehicles. So again, on a plan view of this is 3rd Street, which is northbound. This is your Tyler Avenue. Instead of having the curve go straight, we're actually bumping it out a little bit to allow the pedestrians, again, a shorter crossing distance, but again, become more visible if there's a parked vehicle back here. And so those are really the improvements we're looking. Again, those Tyler Avenue improvements were really through consultation and discussions with the city of Corvallis to hopefully stay in compliance with what they're hoping for that neighborhood bikeway. And so that's really what we're looking to do. But I'd be more than willing to answer any potential questions you may have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Maybe keep sharing your screen because I bet there'll be some questions about different slides.
Yeah, I figured there would be. And I almost said you could interrupt me and ask questions, but sometimes it's easier to get the presentation and then I can answer questions. But
yeah,
I'll
go
keep
ahead.
this one open because I think this has happened the most.
All right, I'll just call on people as they raise their hands. So go ahead, James.
Thanks, Jim. That was a great presentation. And I wanted to point out one other feature that was barely visible, but is another element of it. Would you go to the Tyler slide that showed the median? That one. If you look at the northeast corner, you'll see I'm pointing at it, but you can't see my finger. There's a spot where the path that comes from the waterfront joins the street, so that bicyclists aren't directed into the sidewalk where pedestrians are.
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out, James. So that was actually something our designer identified, was something we completely missed. When we started looking at it, there is an existing multi-use path. It's wider than a sidewalk, and it basically goes there. Well, we actually transitioned it to the street, which everyone has to do anyway if you're a bicyclist, so you're not bicycling on the sidewalk. So it is hard to say, but yeah, this is that transition point. So this actually ties into that path back there, and then this is just an actual sidewalk, not for bicyclists. But thanks for that softball question, James. I really appreciate the ODOT support.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Wendy, then Daniel.
Great. Actually, thanks. That question from James just makes me think. I had two questions, but just since you just clarified that, and you're still showing the slide that James was talking about, will there be increased potential for right hook conflicts if the cyclist is coming into that right turn lane? Is there a way to manage that?
So that is not a right turn lane right now. It is just a lane that I guess it becomes a right turn lane because that's the only movement you could potentially do legally, right? But it's not two separate lanes. It becomes a share-o, where my understanding is it's just a shared thing for that, where the bicyclist can actually go forward, but the vehicle must turn right. So
great.
We haven't thought
and
of
then
any.
And the first question I had before I saw that was, this looks wonderful. What's the timeline?
So we are still designing. Actually, we started this meeting and Steve actually saw me. We were talking to a property owner. So right now we're in our acquisition. So most of the work we need to do is within existing public right of way. So we won't need to do anything, but there is some we have temporary construction easement because, we have to do some work. We have to go a little beyond our right of way. So we're in the process of actually acquiring that. That should happen most of this year, but our plan is to go to bid in, I believe, I should have known this date. The fall or winter of 24, and then construct in 2025, and be a one-season project. And I will say part of that delay of the construction, because we probably could have done this a little faster, but part of the delay is because you have another project, I'm not sure you're familiar with it, in the area called the Van Buren Bridge Replacement Project, that is significantly could be impacting this area. So we tried to minimize the conflict between the two projects because they really are one block apart from each other.
Right. Go ahead, Daniel, and then Dave.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question is pretty simple. What's the lane width on Harrison at this point?
Well, that's actually, I stole this PowerPoint presentation from my mobility advisory committee, and that's all they care about is lane widths. So I actually had all that information on here, but I didn't think you guys would be interested in it, so I actually removed it. But right now there are basically 12-foot lanes. There's that if I can actually go back to, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. So they are 12-foot lanes. This lane, which is the southernmost lane on Harrison Boulevard, is actually like 14 or 15 feet. But it's not enough for parking. It's just basically there was extra space, and so they put it in the lane. So our proposal actually is when we keep the 12 lanes, we're actually shifting the travel lane slightly to the south a couple feet. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. Most people still drive. If you're coming off the bridge, if you look straight ahead, it's hard to know which lane you're supposed to be in, which is why they have that little striping to tell you to direct you to the proper lane. By us shifting to the south, we're actually that's called a skew in designer terms. We're actually improving that skew to actually not have that shift as big, and so actually be more obvious that it would be easier transition off the bridge onto the 3-lane Harrison section.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First, back in the slide when you were talking to Wendy, the question of bicycles going straight through on Tyler with the right turners potentially hitting them. Will you have continuous green on that bike lane so that the drivers know that bikes are going to go straight? Because I use that a lot.
Yeah. So you're talking about for the vehicle that potentially could be behind the bicyclist on Tyler Avenue is what you're talking about?
Well, if you look at the traffic, a bicycle heading westbound on Tyler,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
would want to go straight through that little break in the barrier. And a driver is going to assume that everybody's turning right, unless they get serious notification that some people are going to be going straight.
You're talking about the Second Street traffic vehicles, right?
No, this is a vehicle heading westbound on Tyler who is going to have to turn northbound on Second.
I think Dave is assuming that the bicyclist will not take the lane. So the car behind the bicyclist will come up beside them, then be looking left and taking a right where the cyclist will be going.
I got you. Okay, thank you. That does clarify. So we had not proposed putting any kind of green paint on here. One thing is the maintenance of that, and also it's the conflict is actually back here. So you actually would say you'd want to see some kind of an island for there, or
Bike box.
Yeah, well, there's no traffic light, so a bike box would be questionable or of questionable value. But some way that a driver would know that bicycles might not be turning. Because a driver seeing this situation would assume everybody's turning.
Well, I could definitely bring that back to the design team and see if they have any kind of potential solutions for that. Also, whatever we propose, though, we would have to make sure the city is comfortable with, because Tyler Avenue is a city street, and then they would be responsible for maintenance of anything that we would put there. But I could definitely bring that back to the team.
Thank you. My second question has to do with the width of lanes on Harrison, because cars and especially trucks coming off the bridge tend to not think in terms of 25 miles an hour. They've just come off Highway 34 going, if they actually drop to 40 miles an hour, they're used to 40 miles an hour. It might be advisable to just narrow those lanes.
So it was discussed, I will say it was discussed about whether we can narrow from the 12-foot to 11-foot lanes or something like that. We kind of ruled it out. Basically, the one thing is, with the understanding that these are 3 freight routes, and again, it's different where it's not just the trucks have to go just straight through these areas. They actually have to have turning movements, and they actually need width and stuff to actually be able to do those turning movements. And so by narrowing it out, we thought there'd be more conflicts with trucks being able to turn onto the other highways. So it was something we looked at, and it was something we definitely did look at it seriously. But we thought because of the taking care of all road users, we ruled it out at some point.
Or maybe narrow the center lane. Or just something that lets the drivers know that they're going to a lower speed limit.
Yeah, I will say I actually been on watched this intersection several times, especially at Harrison and 3rd Street. And I've seen a lot of freight trucks actually take 2 and even 3 lanes to be able to
Mhm.
turn right onto 3rd
Yeah.
Street. So again,
Mhm.
I think they almost need a lot of width in some of those configurations, truck configurations, to make that turn. So again, something we thought about, but we did not. We thought this way by actually, and I will say actually, Freight was really pleased when we presented this to the Mobility Advisory Committee. Was very pleased that we actually were separating the motorized vehicles from the bikes. They actually liked that approach because they felt safer and felt like they had less chance to harm other people because they don't want to run over anyone. So
Good. And my final question, you mentioned in the grass area between the bike lane and the sidewalk on Harrison, you were going to be putting in trees.
yes.
And I'm wondering if there's any risk of tree roots growing under the bike path and causing bumps and such. That you need to choose trees that go straight down.
Yeah. So again, I will say the city of Corvallis, who has to maintain the bike lane, has the same concerns, and our landscape designer is working very closely with the city of Corvallis, forester. I don't know exactly what their title is, to make sure we're going to plant the proper trees at that location to minimize any kind of future maintenance of the bike lane. And it's our interest too, to maintenance of the highway too. We don't want them coming up on the highway. So.
And we love trees. We're desperate for trees. We have to prepare for climate warming, and it just makes our city more beautiful. So I was so happy to see those trees. And like we were talking about earlier this week, Jim, this is my route to work on Tyler Crossing, and I'm so happy to see this island. Because cars are going really fast on Second, heading out of town. They're always going over 25 miles an hour. So they're just like, I'm out of the city. Now I can go 35 right away or more. And in Second, coming the other way, let's see, going south, they're trying to make the light. They're also just barely starting to slow down from 45 and 50 farther out on the highway. And so I'm thinking the island itself will probably create a little bit of friction to slow things down.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about like vertical protection for pedestrians and for the island itself. If you put bollards, say, at the mouth of each crosswalk and on the island, it would give a vertical feel of cars going faster. Is there any thought as far as the width, narrowing it as absolutely as much as possible, or adding vertical elements to slow cars down in this intersection?
Okay, so it's a good question. So I agree. I believe that, and again, I always have to make this disclaimer. I am not a traffic designer, a traffic engineer, but I do believe, and through what I've heard discussions, that the island will be a calming mechanism for traffic moving north and southbound on 2nd Street. Again, it's something in the way, so people are more cautious because of that. We are proposing, I think, putting if you can see it, there's these 3 little circles on both sides of each. On the very end is putting some vertical bollards or delineators there. I don't think we were proposing putting anything. I think this one doesn't show, but I think there also was some proposal putting signs basically between the pedestrian crossing, the bike crossing, and here, these 3 little areas to really prevent Tyler Avenue people from crossing. As far as the width of the separator, my understanding, this is about the narrowest we can be, which I think is proposed is about 8 foot is our width of the concrete separator, because we have to be ADA compliant and we have to be able to fit the truncated domes, which basically is there's 2 ADA ramps on either side of it. So just to be able to accommodate the width of those truncated domes, this is about as narrow as we can go. And we can't go wider because we need that. Right now, this is narrowing down this area to 20-foot clearance. So we do get some wide loads in here, and so that would actually further impact freight traffic. So the width of it is kind of where we're at. We can look, I think we are talking about some kind of vertical, but it's more for the Tyler Avenue vehicles, so that to know that it can't go across. And I think this was not designed to be a refuge, but as just a fleet crossing. Really, the overall width of the road or the highway is not very far. So it's not like you have this like a 5-lane highway that you're trying to get halfway across before the light changes on you or something like that. It's fairly narrow. It was really to provide some kind of a divider, a separator, so Tyler Avenue couldn't get through. But again, people could use it as a refuge, but that was not the intent that on my understand of it is.
And then my other little question is, Tyler, between second and third. So one thing I've noticed riding pretty much every day on that road is that lots of people, when they see they're going to miss the light, take a left on third and head to second to try to make a different light. And so since Tyler is a neighborhood bikeway, do you want people cutting through like that? And I don't. And I was wondering if ODOT or the city thought about cut through traffic on that little stretch.
So to cut from second to get to Third Street, right?
I'm thinking third to second. So they're coming is that fourth?
No, this is second.
Oh,
and
third's
third.
going out of town.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm a little
normally
confused.
What
I'm
I see,
confused.
what I've seen is just since I live in Corvallis, I see a lot of people take Third Street, cut Tyler to avoid the light on Second Street light to go northbound on 20, and then take a left on to go northbound, so to continue northbound traffic. So that would prevent that.
I think I was confused there. Yeah, thank you.
So I
All right,
don't think a lot where people going south, you have to go all the way to 4th Street, and mostly in that case would actually just keep going to all the way to Harrison and catch that at that point. So,
all right, I think we have time for one more question. Go ahead, Court. Oop, you're on mute.
Can you go to your Harrison and Third Street slide? And I have a kind of a boundaries question, and that is that how is this all going to connect up with the bridges and with actually the Harrison buffered bike lane? Because I actually now, when I go south on 2nd Street, I go right to Harrison, and I think it's safer to turn right and go up Harrison rather than use Tyler to go anything west. So anyway, when you get to 4th Street, the bike lane, I think it's at 4th, at least it's between 5th and 6th. You have no real bike lane that's like anything on either side of it, or is going to be like anything on either side of it. Because to the west, you have a buffered bike lane, then you have this actually buffered bike lane with a buffer. And so you're going to have one block of just kind of an old bike lane. So it seems like something ought to be done to think about that as a problem. The other boundary thing is that when the bridges get rebuilt, the connection between the bridges and these bike lanes is going to be very useful and interesting and complex, because you'll be coming from the east on the bike lane that's on the east side of the river, and you end up, I don't know how you're going to move over to get across the river if you're going to the west. But anyway, right now you would be dumped right there at 2nd Street and Harrison. And so that's fine as far as I'm concerned going to the west. But I also like the buffered bike lane on Van Buren, and coming out of downtown, sometimes I'll come out on 1st Street and then go up behind there and pick up 2nd. But anyway, how is the bike lanes that will be coming from the east over the bridges going to connect up with this whole system?
Okay. Well, I'll first speak to the Harrison Boulevard past 4th Street. So once we get past 4th Street, that's a city street only. And so that'll be up to the city of Corvallis to see what the transition would be back into, I think, when you get to 6th Street, that buffered bike lane. So I think ODOT's thought was we are trying to, through the highway, the portion that's actually the highway.
Well, now I understand that, but this is a boundaries problem. This is ODOT shifting over to Corvallis, and so we need some coordination, it seems like.
I guess I guess I'm not fully.
Well, maybe Josh Capps can answer this. I don't know, but
yeah. So again, I think our approach is just to, again, we can only make these improvements on the highway. So we transition you right back to past 4th Street to the city street. And there is, you're right, 2 blocks that will be kind of an old standard bike lane versus that buffered bike lane that starts at 6th Street. So hopefully, I don't know if the city has a plan for that. As far as coming off the bridges, so my understanding off the Harrison Bridge, there is no plans to make any kind of changes to the Harrison Bridge, right? The Van Buren Bridge will be replaced. And so if a bicyclist now is coming off of Harrison, just going straight, they have to just go straight on there and then would transition into this this separated bike lane on Harrison Boulevard. And then going out of town, if you're going eastbound on Van Buren, I've seen the plan sets, but I am not as familiar with the Van Buren plan sets to know exactly how that transition. Obviously, we do have here at, if I go back to 2nd Street, you know, we do have a way to get to the 2nd Street bike lane on, you know, that will take you to Van Buren. Obviously, I know there is a multi-use path underneath the Harrison Bridge that would then somehow tie into the Van Buren Bridge.
Right.
And I do understand there will be a nice multi-use path on the new Van Buren Bridge that I would see a lot of people would want to use. And then there would have to be some kind of way to transition if you want to go westbound, again, off of Van Buren to get to Harrison.
Thank you.
Hey, one final question. Sarah.
I'll keep it really quick. If you can go back to the slide you were just on, further to the west.
Whoops. The Harrison one?
Yes. This seems like a really cool opportunity for Corvallis to have some protected intersections. And I'm curious if you could address what might be happening in these spaces where it looks like the buffer continues into the intersection or the bike lane goes straight, but I know you're needing to pull the curb a little bit to make sure the truck apron works on 3rd Street, but on 4th Street, you've got this spot where it looks like the bike lane sort of continues past the crosswalk. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? I can't point to it.
Yeah, I know. So going this way on, staying on 4th Street or on Harrison Boulevard.
For cyclists who are westbound on Harrison Boulevard, is there enough space for a bicycle to dwell to the west of the crosswalk there in a protected space before they cross the vehicle lanes on 4th Street?
So I think when you're here, my understanding, this is still separated from the travel lane. So if you're parked here, which is what you're talking about, right? This is the bike lane. If you're parked waiting for the light. Yeah. Is basically this is a concrete separator right here. So you are still protected. I don't know if that fully qualifies as a bike protection or whatever, but
yeah, no, that's cool. So effectively the stop bar for bikes is past the pedestrian crosswalk and in front of the vehicle lane in such a way that people would kind of see you.
Yes.
That's great. That's really exciting. So, I think that might qualify as Corvallis's first protected intersection, although it's just a piece of an intersection, but that's really neat. Thank you.
Yeah, no, so we have to keep the bike and the pedestrian separated. And so the idea was, they'd be in front of the pedestrian crossing. So they wouldn't be standing there parked while people are trying to cross the road. So
Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to present this to us. This is fascinating and looking forward to this getting built.
Yeah, so I should have provided my contact information, but obviously if anyone does have any future questions, feel free to contact me. Steve, you do have my email address, so you can feel free to share that with anyone. I know James Feldman's got my contact if he needs to get a hold of me too. So
I'll post the website in the notes too. So
okay, perfect.
Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. So,
all right.
Guys, have a good afternoon.